at either table. Make sure to sign up if you feel so. And also there are slips at the entrances if you have questions. We would like for you to fill those out. If you have a slip, you can go ahead and give it to me and I will take that from you. That's all I got for now.
Oh, yeah, the power trucks are going, that's good.
Yes, they said they would probably be gone by. I'm glad they were because,
You're taking up some space. It's a little awkward too.
yeah. So yeah, you'll do the introductions and the little big thing and all of that. You're good to go. Perfect. I will let. Oh, excellent. Thank
Good, how are you?
Last minute.
Yes. Good to see you, yes. Yes, yeah. Seats, yeah. Oh, yeah, the event registration. Oh, good, that would be great. It's good to see you too. Thanks for coming up.
Okay, good morning again. Again, thank you all for being here. If you are new, there's a sign up sheet out there to fill out or slips if you have questions to ask, and you can hand those off to me. So please fill those out if you would like to provide public comment. We ask you please be respectful of the presenters and audience members and withhold all remarks until the public comment portion of the meeting. Now, I would like to invite Secretary of State Diego Morales up to start our meeting.
Okay, this is great. Well, good morning.
Morning.
And thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Ball State for hosting us today. And of course, to many others, but I'd like to introduce a few friends and colleagues in the room, starting with Representative Arrington. Thank you, Representative, for being here. And I'm blessed to work with some of the finest out there, starting with a great county clerk that I have met for many years now. We came in together. Amy Rolfes, San Joseph County Clerk. Thank you for being here, Amy. Another outstanding county clerk, Sharon Milburn, the Carroll County Clerk. Sharon, thank you for being here. Tara Pegg from Wayne County. Tara, thank you, Tara, thank you. And Desiree Ritchie from Cass County. Desiree, thank you for being here. You know, thank you all for being here. It's great to be back in Muncie in Delaware County. Welcome to the first study of election issues meetings. As Indiana Secretary of State, it is both my duty and privilege to ensure our elections are free, fair, safe, and secure. We are here today because of House Enroll Act 1633. This legislation requires my office to study two important issues. And we are here to talk about two and only two important issues. First, holding municipal elections during presidential or midterm election years. Second, whether or not the use of vote centers across Indiana. To carry out this study, the law requires us to hold 3 public meetings. And during these meetings, we want to hear from Hoosiers. We want to include public opinion we receive so we can add into our final report for the Legislative Council. So whether you are for or against moving when we hold municipal elections, or whether you are in support or in opposition to the use of vote centers in Indiana and in your county, we want to know. Since taking office, I have traveled to all 92 counties to speak about election issues. Everywhere I go, I've been bringing up elections and possible changes to the election process, because elections impacts us all. And Hoosiers know, they know best how we should run Indiana elections. Today's meeting is the first of 3 meetings. We are hosting sessions in Indianapolis, Jeffersonville, and of course, this morning here in Muncie, to make sure voices from across Indiana are heard. We want to hear your opinions. But before doing that, today my office and the Voting System Technical Oversight Program right here at Ball State will share some data with all of you. Our office has collected important election data from election administrators from across the state and from election administration and voting survey published by the Election Assistance Commission. We have also collaborated closely with the Voting System Technical Oversight Program to ensure that our study is thorough. My office will present on the timing of municipal elections, and the Voting System Technical Oversight Program will present on the use of vote centers in Indiana. The information that will be presented today, along with the information we receive from public comments, will come together in a report that we must submit to the Legislative Council by November. Before I close, I want to thank everyone who stopped at our booths at the Great Indiana State Fair. My office was once again the proud sponsor of the $2 Tuesdays, and we had booths set up all over the state fair. We were there getting as many eligible Hoosiers registered to vote. And I'm proud to tell you that this is one of my focus, to register as many eligible Hoosiers to vote. I want to increase voter turnout and voter participation in Indiana. And my team and I were doing this at local county fairs, festivals, even along the routes on parades. I am proud to tell you that as the Secretary of State, I've been focusing in my priority on making sure that we can register as many people in our state so they can be part of the election process. Since taking office, we've been working hard, ensuring that Indiana continues to lead the way. And that is done by working together as a team. Your input is as important part in this process. Thank you again for being here and your dedication to our great state. Also, I want to make sure also recognize our Madison County Clerk, Linda, Mindy from our Randolph County Clerk, and of course, Wells County Clerk. Thank you for coming here, and we want to hear your feedback. We're here to listen from you. Please share your feedback and opinions. And again, we will be talking about only these 2 issues this morning. Thank you all. And now I will turn it over to my team to begin the presentation. Thank you.
We do have a couple open seats up here in the front. If anyone in the back is standing, would like to sit down, you are more than welcome to do so. Thank you again, Secretary Morales. Kagan Prentice and Dustin Renner from the Secretary of State's office will begin the presentation portion here. They'll be presenting their findings related to municipal elections and the cost of elections. Once they are done, Dr. Chad Kinsella and Matt Housley from the Voting System Technical Oversight Program will present their findings related to the use of vote centers in Indiana. So we will go ahead and start over here.
All right, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, well, thank you for being here this morning. As mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with the municipal election portion of the study. So some background information on this. We collected this information through a survey of county clerks and through information that was pulled from the statewide voter registration system. So some background on the cost of running municipal elections. Indiana Code 3-5-3-7 allows counties to be reimbursed for municipal election costs. Also 3-5-3-8 kind of lays out how that process is played out. So vote center counties are reimbursed 100%, and then precinct-based voting is a 75-25 split. So as you can see, we have the municipal election costs from the counties that we were able to collect data from for 2023. Next, we have the 2022 midterm election costs. Let everybody have a moment to look at that. And then finally, we have the presidential election total costs. So as you can see, a municipal election costs roughly about the same to administer in Indiana as a midterm election. And then finally, some voter turnout information. These are from the 2023 municipal election, the 2022 midterm election, and the 2024 presidential election. And I will turn it over to Kagan, who has some more data to share with us.
So after going through the total cost of elections, I will point out on the cost of running the municipal elections, the numbers in the parenthesis for the 2023 primary and the 2023 general, the 66 out of 92. There were 66 counties in 2023 that held a municipal primary election. So that's what that number comes from. In the 2023 general, there were 86 out of 92 counties that held municipal elections in the general election. Obviously, towns under a certain population can already hold their elections in a general election year. So that's why not all 92 counties have an election, because they may not have a town over 3,500 people. They can already hold their elections. So that's what that remains. So when you're looking at that 18 million, take into account that not all 92 counties held an election in those years. And then obviously 22 and 24, that represents all 92 counties holding an election. And then, so after collecting the cost of the election data and the turnout data, we decided to look at a cost per vote comparison between municipal primary, municipal midterm primary and presidential primaries, and then moving on to the general elections. So the cost per vote in a municipal primary, you can see here is taking the total cost of the election divided by the raw vote turnout is $27.81. Compared to the midterm primary being $13.42 and the presidential primaries being $16.52. So the cost per vote in a municipal primary is obviously 107% greater than a midterm primary and 71% greater than presidential primary election. And we are currently still pulling numbers from the previous cycle of 2019, 20, and 2018, 19, and 20. And so far those numbers are in this range, and we hope to present those numbers at future meetings and include in the final report. And then moving on to the general elections, obviously the cost per voter is lower than those primary elections because you have a higher raw vote turnout. But you still see that same discrepancy between the municipal generals compared to the midterm general and presidential general, and actually a higher percent difference in that cost per voter than even the primary elections. Obviously, the cost per vote in municipal, that's supposed to be municipal general, is 195% greater than a midterm election and 183% greater than a presidential election. And then, so that is, this data here is taking just the total cost of the election divided by the raw vote total statewide. We also looked at county by county and did an average, and there's a large range within the counties, starting with the municipal primary election. County, the range was from 314 in Boone County all the way up to Whitley County. They are spending $473 per vote in those elections, with a county average of $45. And then in municipal general election, it ranged from $1.58 to $557 in Kosciuszko County, with a county average of $33.22. Obviously, that the range gets lower. The range is smaller and the cost is lower once you go to those midterm primaries and generals. with the range for the midterm primary from $2.93 per vote in Steuben County to the highest with Elkhart being $56.78 per vote. In the county averages of $15.37. Midterm general, that range is $1.81 in Rush County to $48.96 in Boone County, with that average again getting lower to $6.51. And then when you go to the presidential primary, you can see the range is from $2.77 per vote in Steuben County again to $44.27 in Porter, with a county average of $14.27. And then that finally last presidential general, you have the lowest of 67 cents per vote in Greene County to the highest of $24.33 per vote in Brown County, with a county average of $5.39 per vote. And then after looking at cost per votes, we moved on to looking at voter turnout, potential increases of voter turnout you could have by moving a municipal election. So what we evaluated, we pulled the vote history of in every county in the state. And we looked at voters that voted in the 2023 municipal election, but didn't vote in the 2022 general. And then we looked at the voters that voted in the 2023 municipal elections, but did not vote in the 2024 general. So we found that 78,000 voters, just over 78,693 voters voted in the 2023 municipal general election, but did not vote in that 2022 election for whatever reason. That would have equated to a 1.65% increase in overall turnout. You just assume those voters, if you move those municipal elections, they're voting in that 2022 general. Or if you move them to the 2024 general, we found that there were 23,395 voters that had voted in the 2023 municipal election that did not vote in the 2024 general election. We didn't account for an increase in campaign spending from local candidates. That would have been a much wider research process of pulling campaign finance data from local counties. But you could see that you could account that there would be an increase of spending from local candidates in these elections, and that would be an additional driver for voter turnout statewide. And then we looked at ballot drop-off rates. This is something, so this study, the impetus for the study was a bill that was presented last year. And one of the discussions in committee was ballot drop-off rate. Ballot drop-off rates in municipal elections compared to general elections. Longer ballots equate to obviously higher ballot drop-off rates. When we looked at a previous study on this, and they have found that ballot fatigue does lead to voters skipping lower profile races when ballots get longer. But the increased turnout in those on-cycle elections outweigh the effects of those drop-offs. So having that main sort of presidential, Senate, congressional election draws voters out, and obviously increases the likelihood that those voters will participate in the down ballot races, even if some just may not vote. So what we looked at, we looked at the ballot drop-off rates in 3 cities in the 2023 election that had competitive mayoral elections. So we looked at Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, and Carmel. So in Indianapolis, from the mayor to the city council, there's an 8.84% ballot drop-off. So there are 8% less people, and this ballot's 2 people on the ballot. You have mayor, city council. So there were still 8.8% of people that went in to vote for the mayor, but not the city council. In the Fort Wayne mayor election, that was an 8.73% drop-off between Fort Wayne mayor election and the city council. And then the Carmel mayor, that was a lower ballot drop-off, which I'll explain on the next slide. It was a 4.09% ballot drop-off. And then we turned our attention to the presidential year, and we decided to pick president to, I just picked a countywide office that not a lot of people really know about. So we picked county surveyor. And then we did account for the counties that did have county surveyor races. So we looked at the total votes for president compared to the total votes for county surveyor. And there was a over 22.74% ballot drop off in those races. And then in the midterm elections, we did the Senate to township trustee, because every township trustee is elected in a midterm election. So that was an easy, just 1-to-1 comparison. And that would be the lowest position on the ballot in those, unless municipalities already moved their election to a midterm year. that would usually be the lowest position on ballot. So that was a 19.56% ballot drop off. So one thing that we did like to mention, the ballot drop off rates in uncontested elections. So a contributing factor in that discrepancy between the ballot drop off rates and the different elections would be uncontested elections. So if you look at the county surveyor races, that 22%, 22.74% ballot drop off, 87% of those surveyor races were not contested. And then, as well as the township trustee, 85% of the township trustee races were not contested statewide. Contrast that with the city council races where you have the lower ballot drop off rates. In Fort Wayne, 50% of the council weren't contested, 40% in Indianapolis were uncontested, and only 17% of the Carmel city council races went uncontested. So if you factor in those contested races, that ballot drop off race is likely smaller, but still somewhat significant. But when you account for that increase of voter turnout that you get between the separate elections, you had 603,000 people vote statewide in 2023. So you may get a 5-10% ballot drop off in those elections between mayor and city council compared to the 20% in the midterm, but you're also over doubling your turnout in the midterm and tripling your turnout in a presidential general election. And we looked at state cost impacts. Obviously, elections, obviously local governments administer elections, but there are state cost impacts as well. The BMV has to be open for the Monday prior to the election day, an election day for extended hours when there is an election. We have not pulled the cost. We have communicated with the BMV to try to get this estimated cost. We haven't done that yet. We hope to have that in the final report. There's a cost for the state for a platform called Democracy Live that we host to provide accessibility to sight disabled voters, and that's $50,000 each election, primary, general. The cost for the statewide voter registration vendor to keep their help desk call center open for extra hours, and the cost for Homeland Security law enforcement support on election day. So there are other costs that aren't easy to find. The county clerks obviously report how much an election costs for them, but there are other costs that are associated with elections and holding those. And we would like to note that this isn't just a problem in Indiana. Multiple studies have been done that show that low voter turnout in standalone local elections is a problem nationwide. We pulled 2 studies and analyzed those. There is a study in 2014 that looked at 340 different elections from 144 cities nationwide. And average turnout was 25.8%, which is in the range that ours is in. And another study looked at 332 different mayoral elections in 38 large US cities and found a similar average of 27%. So well within our range. So this is consistent across the country. And then the last thing we looked at is local elections being representative of the electorate. And we pulled this from other studies and we didn't look at specifically Indiana. So local elections with fewer races being on the ballot does lead to selective participation and voters being comprised of people that care about the issues that are at stake in those elections, and that could allow interest groups more influence over the elections. One study that we did find specifically was school board races. Obviously, that's not an issue here in Indiana because our school board races are in those midterm and presidential elections. But it did find that teachers are 7 times more likely to vote in school district elections when those are standalone elections. Replace teachers with local government employees, and that result is likely similar. And then studies also show that voters in local elections are demographically unrepresentative of the electorate overall. That goes for race, sex, just across the board, just not representative of the electorate overall. So that is the end of our presentation. I will hand it over to B. Stop to go over the vote center portion.
Good afternoon. So I'm on sabbatical this semester. This is the closest thing I will have all semester to a classroom. So Very excited about that. Real quick, in hosting this meeting, VSTOP is fulfilling its contractual responsibilities to the state of Indiana under IC Code 311-16 and related legislation. So the research findings which are presented, they're there to meet those expectations listed under Activity G and the technical consulting that we have. So as part of that, but so Matt and I, again, I think I went by his desk one day and I was like, hey, there's this vote center study. We need to do this. I'll bet it could take us like a couple of days. So we opened Pandora's box and here we are. So poor Matt got sucked into this too. And I was like, oh, this will be easy. It'd take no time at all. Anyway, so there's the two of us looking our best, a little bit better maybe on pictures than today. But anyway, so Matt Hasley and myself. So the goal of the study is to analyze and estimate cost savings and effects on voter turnout by requiring all counties to use vote centers. Again, something discussed at the beginning. So the initial analysis and objectives of all of this is we looked at election staffing, particularly poll workers, equipment usage, voting locations, the numbers, estimated election cost. Matt had to plow through. You can go on his desk and see the stacks of papers that he had to go through to get all of that. Voter turnout. And
You may want to go to the front, take the front and center.
okay. And then
So
voter
we can pick you up.
voter experience, and I'll get into that one. So some of the different methods, we try to do some statistical and comparative analysis. So this gets a little bit like class. Some of this you might, hopefully you had your coffee this morning. But anyway, so some of the statistical, we looked at vote center effects on voter turnout using a difference on different analysis. Voter experience. So one of the nice things is, though in some of the other research that's been done on voter experience on vote centers, you had academics that kind of handed out and had their undergraduates hand out surveys. We didn't do that, obviously, but MIT has a nice survey that they do. They've done it every year. They didn't do it in 2018, but they asked the exact same questions, and you can get, there's 300 respondents from Indiana, which are supposed to be, again, representative of the state. So we looked at those and we could get voter experience, and then raw data comparison. Matt did a lot of that. So again, election staffing, equipment usage, voting locations, and election costs. This is a very busy slide, and basically, like, this is, again, this will be available. Like, this is all the stuff, for lack of a better, more academic term, that we look. This is all the data about that we looked at. And again, the idea is the report is only as good as the data that we have. One of the things I do want to note is we wanted to compare apples and oranges. And I think the more conversation we had thinking about 2020, that we decided 2020 was a pineapple. And if you, all of you lived through 2020 and know that that was an odd year for a great many reasons, but mostly, again, kind of a once in a lifetime event happened, and then mostly not fun for anyone. But again, it caused some odd differences that had to be taken, particularly that year. So we did throw that out. And so these are some of the preliminary findings that we have. So some of the literature, so there's been some research, a lot of the research that comes out about that came out on turnout and vote centers mostly comes from Colorado and Texas. And a lot of it is an analysis of like one county. For some reason, well, as Rice University and a couple other, like, they really love looking at Houston. But Houston did some interesting things. Again, maybe that's for another time. But initial studies of vote centers in Colorado and Texas, they found modest increases in turnout, especially among infrequent voters. And again, this is mostly in your like midterms and like off-year elections. And Texas has, again, I'm no expert on Texas elections, but in 2007, in odd years, they're not municipal elections, they have constitutional elections. And again, very similarly, they've had like very low turnout. And in that case, the vote centers helped Texas with their voter turnout on those kind of off-year elections. Some of the research in California associated vote centers, again, with modest voter turnout. The type of election was very important. Again, across the board, all the analysis, there was no difference in turnout for presidential elections with vote centers and non-vote center counties. Very modest impacts on some midterms, and then a bigger impact on kind of like your off-year elections, if you have them, or special elections. So that was one of the bigger things that they looked at. Some of the things again that the Bowen Center did in Indiana, and some of the, like, some southern municipal elections, found that they had no impact on voter turnout. So again, if you look across the board at all the research, it's a very mixed bag on turnout. Some of the voter experience. So most of the research found that there were high levels of voter satisfaction with vote centers. A lot of it kind of says it's all about how you roll it out. So it's kind of, there's different experiences, and again, there was one I was reading on Colorado, and I think I mentioned it there. It was like Larimore County experience, more efficient elections and better trained personnel. It was like they had this wonderful thing, they rolled it out and it was awesome. And then Denver did it and it was not good. And that happens. And again, it's different experiences. And again, I use my parents a lot and they still have no idea. I use them in class and he's here. It's like, so Kenton County, Kentucky, where I'm originally from, had vote centers the first year. And my dad had to wait in line for an hour. And this was in 2022. He swore he would never vote again, but we got him back. He voted in 2024. Don't worry. But anyway, so, and then there's some more research that found, and again, this is Harris County, that's Houston. They actually said there were negative experiences. Again, a lot of it depends on the rollout. But again, what they did is they found people didn't like vote centers, and the people they surveyed in Houston, Texas. Take that for what it's worth again. But again, that's kind of the literature. This is a lot busier. So literature on election costs. As again, we have a lot of clerks in here. It's tough to run elections, and they could tell you all kinds of horror stories. And it's expensive, and there's precincts, and there's a lot of administrative challenges conducting those elections, and precinct-based voting on election day is expensive and labor intensive. So there's been a couple of different things. They found that Colorado used it, and they found that the counties did overall, again, so this is older, like this is 2008. And you can see here that they saved a couple of dollars per voter, and that's not insignificant, I would say. So if you look at, again, that's a per voter, not like a $2.80 savings. That would be, but that's per voter. So when you start putting that in and multiplying that per voter, that adds up. The Indiana Fiscal Policy Institute, along with the Bone Center, did some stuff, and they both found that there were cost savings to be had by moving from your traditional precinct-based to vote centers. And then there was this really odd study, but I tremendously enjoyed it. It was a good read. It was on Farragut, Tennessee, which I found out is a little town right outside of Knoxville. This guy went there. He runs their MPA program at UT, and found that they saved like about $3,000 in a municipal election in Farragut, Tennessee. So there. You ever go there, you'll know. So one of the key things I would say kind of across the board when you look at vote centers, the trend in Indiana and the trend across the nation is they're growing, not shrinking. And once people go there, they haven't come back. Indiana is, again, so this is just 2012 to 2024. And again, you can see the number of counties that are using precinct-based voting has gone down. And the number of people using vote centers has gone up. I think it's 72 counties,
66 and 26.
66 and 26, pardon me, that are using vote centers. So it's gone up, and I think the initial, there was a three counties. It was Cass, Tippecanoe, and I'm missing one that piloted it in 2006. So we've come a long way on vote centers, and now there are obviously more vote center counties than non-vote center counties. So I am going to let Matt talk to you all about the very in-depth analysis he did on poll workers and equipment and costs. Matt, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Kinsella. So just as a heads up, you're going to see a lot of stuff on these slides. My job is going to be to make it make sense and hopefully make it a little bit more simple. But I did want to provide all the information up front to be as transparent as possible. So the first analysis I wanted to look at was what counties were votes or were precinct based in 2016 and then used a vote center model in 2024, and look at the difference in the staffing cost or in the staffing of that election between those 2 years. So the data that we utilized, I was able to find 36 counties that were not vote centers in 2016, but then were vote centers in 2024. And then I used a control group, which is 22 counties that did not switch and that still have not switched to vote centers at that time. And so these are the counties. I'm not going to go through them, but just in case you were curious to know. Again, I always want to provide all the data so everybody knows where exactly we're getting our numbers from. So this is what we found. We actually found that when counties that were precinct-based in 2016 switched to 2024, they used on average 32% less poll workers in the presidential election. So, you know, I would consider that to be, you know, almost a third is a pretty significant amount of poll workers that were not utilized from 2016 to 2024. I decided to look at those control counties because I wanted to see, did they have a change in their poll worker numbers? And they did. They also used fewer poll workers in 2016 and 2024, but they only used on average 13% fewer poll workers. So you can say overall, this general election in 2024 got a little bit more efficient than it was in 2016, but the effects were much greater in our vote center counties. So when those precinct-based counties switched to vote centers, they saved a third of poll workers versus the same counties that used precincts in 16 to 24 used 13%. So that yields us that 19% difference. So realistically, when you actually take the control group, subtract it from the difference in the vote center counties, we got on average 19% fewer poll workers used in the 2024 general election by our vote center counties versus our precinct counties. Because our counties, we have counties that have 4,000 registered voters, and we have counties that have 100,000 registered or 100,000 registered voters, and we have counties that have over 350,000 registered voters. We thought it would be best to take a look and break it down by size. And so what we did, again, this is all the data. I'm not going to, get too crazy here on you. But what we did is we actually broke them down into 4 categories: small, medium, large, and extra large counties. So what we did is we took our 8-year average turnout. The reason that we use turnout is because, like we've talked about, we struggle with voter turnout here in Indiana. We're lucky if we can sometimes get over 50 to 60%, right? And that's on an optimistic side, right? And so we decided to use voter turnout in the analysis because it represents the most realistic picture of the voting population that is turning out and actually voting in our elections. So we decided to take the 8-year average, so 2016, 18, 22, 24, and do an 8-year average turnout. And then we grouped these counties, so those same 58 counties that I used in the previous analysis, and we grouped them by size. This is what we were able to find. So in our small counties, so these are counties that had an 8-year average turnout of 2,000 to 14,999 voters. So again, these are small counties, our very small counties. They used on average 37% less poll workers when they switched from 2016 to 2024. Whereas our precinct counties that has stayed precincts used about 12% fewer poll workers. So on average, small counties used about 25% fewer poll workers when they ended up switching from vote centers from precinct-based to vote centers. So again, a quarter less poll workers needed for those vote center counties. In our medium-sized counties, so these are average turnouts of 15,000 to 49,999 voters, we found that it was about 28% fewer poll workers that were needed when they switched, compared to the precinct-based counties, which was 26% fewer. I do want to say that while this is only 2% fewer, we do have quite a few counties in our medium-sized county group that do what is called super precincting. We do it here in Delaware County, where you are a precinct-based county, but you are combining multiple precincts into one location. So super precincts, we have a lot of those in our medium-sized counties that do a lot of super precincting. So that's why the result is probably not as great. But still, on average, using fewer poll workers for our vote center counties. In our large counties, so this is our 50,000 to 999,000 average 8-year turnout voting counties. This is a huge difference. If you actually look at the raw data, 234 fewer poll workers on average for these large counties. So again, this is using averages. So on average per county, they use 234 fewer poll workers, which equated to that 34% difference. But our precinct base, which we only had one county that fit into this requirement. As you can see in the switch counties, we only had 3 counties that fit into these requirements. So take that as you wish. But Monroe County, they ended up using a few more poll workers from 2018 or from 2016 to 2024, a 27% increase, and they use precinct-based models. So again, only 4 counties that we could really use in this part of the analysis, but still, again, showcasing a massive difference for large counties. And our extra large counties, so these are 100,000 plus voter year turnout. We could only have 4. So this is our 8-year average that used 4. Marion County ended up needing 14% more poll workers when compared to 2016 to 2024. I'm not going to claim to know why they used more poll workers, so I don't know. Chances are it was probably they had increased operations. Maybe they added more locations. Maybe they had a larger turnout, expected turnout, so they utilized more workers. In our precinct base, this was the only one that noticed a significant decline and was different from their counterparts. Allen, Hamilton, and Lake County use 15% fewer poll workers, and they are precinct-based. So this is one that probably had the most inconclusive, but again, when you only have 4 counties to work with, it limits the amount of analysis that you can do. When looking at, we wanted to do the same exact thing, but for midterm elections. So what we did, we found the counties that were precinct-based counties in 2018 election, and then had switched through that time and ended up using a vote center model in the 2022 election. So that allowed us to have 19 counties that fit that criteria that were precinct-based and then switched to vote centers between those two elections. And then this control group included 23 counties that we were able to use. So precinct-based counties that have stayed. So we're doing the exact same thing. So what we found overall is in midterm elections, very similar findings. They needed 39% fewer poll workers, saved on average 78 poll workers. So on average, these counties who switched needed 78 fewer poll workers. What we found is our precinct-based counties, they needed 63. So yet again, our elections from 18 to 22 must be getting a little bit more efficient. They also use fewer poll workers, but even though that number is pretty close to 78, it was a significant in the aggregate. It was only a 17% decrease in poll worker usage. So again, our vote center counties, when they switched from vote centers to precincts, they saved 22%. So they used on average 22% fewer poll workers than our precinct-based counties. We did the same thing and we broke it down by size. So for our small counties, we found that again, it matched pretty significant. Most of these are pretty similar to the same findings as the presidential year. Small counties used 23% fewer poll workers overall when compared, 37% on their own. But when you utilize that adjusted for the control group, it equaled 23% fewer poll workers for vote center counties. So again, small counties really, really benefit in terms of poll worker staffing. In our medium counties, this was a pretty stark difference here. 40% fewer, just over 40% fewer poll workers needed in that 2018 to 2022 switch, yielding a 12% fewer when you adjust it for the control counties, so those precinct counties. So again, counties are saving staff when they have switched from their precinct model to a poll worker model, both in presidential and midterms. And we saw the same thing for our large counties. We had no extra large counties that met this criteria that switched, so we couldn't do an analysis on them. So we decided to dig a little bit deeper into 2024. We thought if we're going to do an analysis, let's use the most recent year and really explore that data deeper. So this utilized all 92 counties. So 66 counties used vote centers in 2024. 26 counties used a precinct-based model in 2024. We decided to take the total number of poll workers in the 2024 election and do the same thing, find some matches and see what ended up paying. Again, we broke our counties down by size, this time using 24 turnout. Okay, since we're only looking at the 2024 election, we only used the 2024 turnout. So we have a few counties that ended up changing from that analysis to this one. For example, St. Joseph County fell into the large group in the 8-year average turnout, but in 2024 went over 100,000 voters. They moved to the extra large category. So we had a few counties that switched switched their classification when we only looked at the 2024 turnout numbers. This is the chart. This is not what you need to know, but I wanted to put it in there. This showcases the average voter turnout, the average poll workers, and the average voters per poll worker. So what we did is we took the turnout, divided it by the number of poll workers that the county utilized, and that gave us our average per voter per poll worker. So how many voters is one poll worker serving on average in the counties? This is what we found. For our small vote center counties, they used 3 fewer poll workers per 3 fewer poll workers overall when compared to the precinct counties. So not a super large difference there when looking at 2024, but they were able to service 58 additional voters per poll worker compared to the precinct-based counties. So even though it was only 3, they were actually, because they had a larger turnout, the vote center counties had larger turnout, they served more voters with fewer poll workers. So that was that would make sense when you're thinking about it, but they serviced more voters with fewer poll workers. Where it was really, really pronounced was in our medium, large, and extra large counties. On average, vote center counties use 41 fewer poll workers in elections. So 41 fewer poll workers, and they were able to service 80 additional voters per poll worker. Our large counties used 198 on average fewer poll workers, and were able to service 94 additional poll workers per voter, or voters per poll worker, pardon me. And in our extra large counties, they say they used on average 564 fewer poll workers. Oh, more. Yes, they did. They did use more poll workers. This was the one that was the outlier of the group. And I do believe that it was because of Marion County. They had an increase, right, in their poll worker usage. So that is why they used 564 more poll workers, and they serviced 41 fewer voters. So I think what this can really tell us about 2024 is that when you really scale vote centers, depending on how the county really runs their election will really determine how much savings they can really get. You know, there's 92 counties, there's 92 different ways of doing things. So what did we say overall with this? What we found is that vote center counties require fewer poll workers than precinct counties. That was our probably our most substantial finding. The transition had the largest impact on our small and large counties. So in small counties and large counties, they had a very large impact when they switched in terms of fewer poll workers being used. In 2024 specifically, small, medium, and large vote center counties serviced more voters with fewer poll workers. So again, in every one of those 3 categories, they were able to service more voters with fewer poll workers. And then again, like I said, in 2024, the extra large non-vote center counties served a higher number of voters. And again, I believe that super precincts, specifically in Allen, Hamilton, and Lake County, when they super precinct those, I think that could have an impact because the only other extra large counties we used in 2024 was Marion and St. Joseph, and their vote center counties. So again, minimal data sets. When we looked at equipment, it was a crapshoot, let me tell you. Counties' costs vary so greatly when it comes to equipment costs. It was not a comparable analysis. Counties are using different amounts of equipment. They have different service contracts with their vendors. Some counties rely more on their vendor contracts, some rely less. It was just such a variation that we weren't able to really gather anything definitive. Also, what I will say is that counties who are precinct right now will have enough equipment to change to vote centers. So the equipment savings is not really going to be there because they've already purchased the amount of equipment they need to service precinct voters. We did see that counties using DRE systems will probably deploy a similar amount of equipment because they're going to need to have vote centers that can then, be manageable with wait times, et cetera. They're going to use very comparable amounts of equipment. What we did find is the most significant kind of effect for equipment is that counties utilizing optical scan systems may use fewer scanners and BMDs. But again, that is only based off of if the county chooses to use less scanners at those locations, or maybe they have everybody filling out their ballot by hand, so then they have less BMDs because of the location. So again, because the counties use so many different kinds of equipment and have so many different variations in how they use that equipment, we were not able to find any definitive findings there. When looking at voting locations, again, we were comparing voting locations in 2024. So what we did is we wanted to look at the precinct count. How many precincts does a county have? And how many actual voting locations did they have? All 92 counties were included in this analysis. We broke them down the exact same way we've been breaking them down this whole time, so you know what's up. Chart, so I'm not gonna bother you, but what I want you to look at though is that far left column. As you can see, our small counties on average used 2 locations less, 9 locations less for our medium center counties, 4 locations less for our large counties, and then in our extra large counties, 24 locations less. I wanted to actually show you all and break it down by small, medium, and large counties. So what you're seeing here on the screen is the black is the non-vote centers, and the red are the vote center counties. So the column that is, let me make sure I'm doing it right. The column that is to your left on each graph is the precinct count. So as you can see in small counties, they have way more precincts. The vote center counties on average had more precincts than the non-vote center counties, yet used fewer locations. So more precincts, yet used fewer locations. In our medium-sized counties, our non-vote center counties had more precincts, about the same, 45 and 48, so not a huge difference, but on average had arguably the same number of precincts, but look at the voting locations. Significantly less for our medium-sized counties. So again, servicing almost the same number of precincts, yet on average use 9 less locations. So same thing for our large. You can see our vote center counties have serviced both in our large and extra large counties that you see there. More precincts. So they have significantly more precincts in those counties. As you can see there, fewer voting locations. So our vote centers are effectively servicing more precincts with fewer locations. That's what we were able to come to the conclusion. As you saw in those graphs, the medium and large vote center counties deploy significantly fewer locations when compared to the precinct-based peers. So significantly fewer locations. And again, in most cases, vote center counties on average have more precincts and fewer locations. So again, servicing more precincts with fewer locations. A direct cost savings could not be established with this because yet again, it varies so greatly. But where it could reduce is the staffing requirements for those locations, which could change the cost. So let's actually talk, and I'm going to finish up here talking about the costs, and Dr. Kinsella will get into the other two. Again, this is really important information, so I want to make sure that you all feel very informed about the study and what we're doing here. So when looking at the cost comparison, we use the Secretary of State survey to get the average base pay for poll workers in these 50 counties that submitted the survey. So 50 counties, they needed to submit by 8/11/2025, as you can see, to be included in this. So if you're in here and you, as county clerk, and you completed that survey and it was after 8/11, you would not be included in this analysis. But what we did is we took the lowest pay that the county pays to their poll workers. So for example, inspectors and judges may make more than just average poll clerks, but almost every voting location has more poll clerks than judges and inspectors. So it didn't make sense to use the most expensive paid person. It used more sense to make the base pay. So what we did is we found an average per poll worker cost. Again, here, you don't really need to look at the chart too much, but what we found is that the precinct-based counties served more voters with a larger number of voters. That makes sense, right? Okay, you served more voters with more poll workers. That makes sense on its face, right? More voters equals more poll workers. But when you actually look at the average per poll worker for these counties and do an average, our vote center counties on average service 35 more poll worker or voters per poll worker. So even though on the face, it seems like, oh, well, they service more voters, so they would have more poll workers. When you actually break down the cost comparison and you actually break it down by county per poll worker per voter, they're servicing more poll workers or more voters with fewer poll workers. The compensation was actually almost the same. So the total for our vote center counties was 139 base pay on average per poll worker. And then our precinct-based counties or our non-vote center counties was, I think, $136. So they pay on average about the same, but they had significantly higher average cost. So our precinct-based counties spent just over $28,000 on average, which is about 19% of the county's budget on average in all of those counties, to pay their poll workers. In our vote center counties, they averaged about 9% of their budget as well being utilized to poll workers, but spent approximately only $15,900 on their poll worker cost. So almost double. The cost is almost double for precinct-based counties in terms of how much they paid their poll workers compared to vote center counties. So that was a really huge finding that we were able to find. So then our last analysis here looked at cost per voter over time. We utilized 92 counties. We utilized their CEBs, so their CEB 9s. It gives us the estimated election cost. And we divided that by the 12-year turnout average. And we were able to get a cost per voter in each county for 12 years, excluding 2020, right? This is what we found. So what we found is that on average, the cost of running an election from 2012 to 2024 has increased for precinct-based counties, but the cost overall on average for counties as they switched from precinct to vote center models, which is the red line, went down. So as we're seeing over the course of this 12 years, the trend line, right, we're only working with 12 years, not 50. So the trend line isn't, as reliable as if you had more time series data. But what we did find is that the cost on average is going down for our vote center counties, and the cost for our precinct counties continues to go up over time. We found that in 2012, there was a little bit more. The cost per voter was a little bit more expensive for vote center counties. I was like, you know what? It was early on, they were still figuring it out. Because after that, as you can see, they saved on average 45 cents in 2014, 88 cents per voter in 2016, $1.02 in 2018, $1.34, and in 2024, our vote center counties on average saved $2.04 per voter when compared to our 26 precinct-based counties. That's actually what we're going to get ready to look at here. So what you're seeing here is a breakdown based off of the county size. So again, same parameters we've already used, county size and equipment. So we looked actually, what are the counties that are using direct record electronic systems and the counties that are using optical scan systems? Was there a difference in the cost per voter there? What we found is that the small DRE counties on average saved 80 cents per voter when they are vote center counties. Our vote center optical scan counties saved $2.33. So significant cost savings for optical scan small counties. For our medium DRE counties, they saved on average $2.27 when switching to our optical scan counties, which also saved money at $2.85 per voter when they switched to vote centers. So again, our vote centers in almost all respects, except for our large op scan counties, they spent $2 more per voter. Again, I'm not gonna even describe to know why that is, but they use $2 and more cents per voter to run those. We could not do a study on the large, extra large, and extra large, or large and extra large, because no counties met those requirements, right? So what we found is when you just break it down solely by equipment type. So we have two systems, our direct record electronic and then our optical scan systems. The direct cost per voter was $4.05 for our DRE counties and was $7.65 for our op scan counties. So again, that was the average cost for our vote center counties that utilize direct record electronic and then our counties that use optical scan. In 2024, when you break it down then by precinct and equipment type, you can see those differences. The cost to run the 2024 election for our vote center DRE counties that utilized vote centers was $3.62. The precinct cost for our DRE counties that did not use them, $4.55. So it was more affordable, lower cost per voter for our DRE vote center counties. And also you can see that our vote center optical scan counties saved just about 40 cents per voter. What does that tell us? On average, over time, the cost of running elections, while very crazy, as you saw, very unpredictable from year to year, on average, precinct-based voting is becoming more expensive, and optical scan, or not optical scan, vote center counties are becoming a little bit more affordable. Over the 12-year period, the cost to run the election was on average $5.02 for vote center counties, and the 12-year average for our non-vote center counties was $6.50. So again, the 12-year average, we're saving money with our vote center counties per voter than we are with our precinct-based counties. As you can see there in 2024, the savings was $2.04. So I wanted to reiterate that again. So when looking at the 66 counties versus the 26 counties in 2024, $2.04 per voter was saved by our vote center counties versus our precinct-based counties. And then lastly, medium-sized counties, they had the greatest cost per voter savings. And then our optical scan and DRE, they also had the largest savings. So medium-sized counties, when they switched to vote centers, they saved the most significant cost overall when looking at it. That is it for me. Thank you all for bearing with me. I'm going to pass it over. Dr. Kinsella is going to talk about turnout and voter experience.
So I have good news. I think I've only got 4 slides. When we started this, I told Matt that he could have the easy part. And thankfully he bought it. So here we voter turnout. So methods, so we did a difference on difference analysis. And again, I would mention this is preliminary. We still have to add a lot of control values, and I'll explain that a little bit. So we were looking at 2010 to 2024, and difference on difference statistically as a way to kind of look across the differences in vote center and non-vote center counties during an election and across time in elections. So it's one of the best ways to do it, kind of complex. And then we just got Indiana official turnout numbers. I computed both turnout numbers for registered voters and voting age according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And so there'll be 2 different ones, not totally different when you look at them. So although vote centers and counties consistently have higher turnout than non-vote center counties, the difference does not reach statistical significance. The idea is so one of the things that we'll do as in the final report is add income, education, and age. Those are 3 major predictors of turnout, which we didn't do in this one. And I think that will take away a lot of what we see in the next slide. So you can see here just across. So if you look at the first one, maybe I should put this to the left. Anyway, the difference, so the first 3 are the registered voters, and then the next 3 are voting age. And again, so there's a little bit, again, some of the counties might purge their rolls at different times. So there might be some problems with registered voters. So we did both just to take a look, and you can see overall, like there's a couple instances in some of the midterms where it approaches statistical significance, a difference in difference analysis, but it never did reach that. And ultimately, we also we'll put in some of those control values, and including, I forgot, like the total population, and that's been done in several of the other studies that look at turnout. And I think it will kind of wash out, so to speak, statistically, some of these other, some of the differences in turnout. And again, just to kind of point it out, I think it's like if I were using all as a classroom, it's like Hamilton County is probably the most interesting county because it was, they're precinct based. They use one of the lowest costs in the state, and they have the highest turnout in the state. But it's like, if anybody's driven through Hamilton County, especially Fishers lately, which I've done a couple of times, what's going on in Hamilton County? They have money, and there's a whole lot of people there with higher education. So that's going to affect some of this analysis. But overall, and what this shows is pretty consistent with a lot of the other literature, in that, again, it's kind of a wash, so to speak, in terms of total turnout, although it is worth mentioning that the vote center counties do have higher turnout, generally speaking, just without including any of those control variables, than non-vote center counties. Voter experience, I told you it'd be short. So what I did is just a simple t-test, and MIT has the Survey of Performance of American Elections, and they do a really good job of it. It's a really good data set to use if any of you are so inclined. And I'm going to try to do a little bit more, but just for the sake of time, we did a t-test on some of these different things. And typically what they do, and some of the other studies have utilized it, there's 4 questions that they utilize across that try to get at vote center performance versus non-vote center performance. And so I'll take a minute to kind of point those out. So again, these are the years that were available according to MIT. And I was like, hey, what happened to 2018? They said we didn't get the money that year. So one of them is how difficult is it to find your polling place to vote? How well were things run at your polling place where you voted? Approximately how long did you have to wait in line to vote? And please rate the performance of the poll workers at the polling place where you voted. Those are 4 standard questions that are used across the literature, regardless if they use MIT data or created their own survey. Those are the 4 big ones that are typically used verbatim as they're used by MIT. And what you'll see here is kind of early on, there's a couple, at least on the how much time did you wait in line. Overall in 2012 and 2014, there was a statistically significant difference in vote center counties to non-vote center counties, that people at vote center counties waited less time in line. But overall, the rest of it, they were pretty much not significant. You have the 2022, how hard was it to find your vote center? And it was easier to find your vote center polling place in 2022, significantly so than your non-vote center county. But overall, and this isn't bad news for vote centers or non-vote. Most of the time, people seem to have, according to the MIT data, similar experiences for them, except for a couple of years. And I would note also that 2012 and 2014, and then 2022, because we didn't use 2020, those are years where there's a pretty big surge in the number of vote center counties. So you would probably expect those at that point in time to be statistically significantly different, but overall not a whole lot to look at here. So based on it's like that MIT data, again, they survey the entire country, and we pulled out just obviously the Indiana people. There seems to be a little difference in the experience between those in vote center and precinct based counties. And then, as I talked about, like there's a couple instances where there are, and those were instances where you had pretty big surges in the number of vote center counties. We still need to kind of, if you will, kind of whip this data up in some different ways. And so I think in the final report, we'll have a lot more of a little bit more complex and robust analysis of this. But again, consistent with like some of the findings. And again, at the beginning, some of the literature, the vote center experience is very different. It depends upon how well counties manage it. Even again, you could look at Larimer County, Colorado, and Denver, Colorado. They introduced vote centers at the same time, and voters had very different experiences. Larimer did, I don't know where Larimer County is in Colorado, but anyway, they had a much better experience. They had a better rollout. Denver didn't, and people were not happy. And then for whatever reason, people in Texas didn't like their vote centers. I don't. That's Houston. I don't know. It's hot there. So anyway. So those were the basic findings there in terms of, and that's all we have.
Hey, thank you again to our presenters. All right. We will now move to public comment portion of this meeting. Attendees are invited to provide comments on the topics presented on. For purposes of the study and out of respect for other audience members who want to speak, please keep your comments contained on the topics being discussed. If you begin to go off topic, we will gently remind you of the topics. And if you continue to not provide comments related to the presentation, we will gently cut you off. We hope to include public comment in some way in the final report to the General Assembly. If before you make your comments, you have a clarifying question to the data presented, we will answer those questions. Outside of those clarifications, for the sake of time, we will not be answering other questions today. You may ask questions as part of your remarks, and we will take note of those and do our best to get back to you. So again, if you didn't fill out the sign up sheet with your email, make sure to do so we can get back to you if you have any questions. Please state your name, the county that you are from, and who you are representing if applicable for the record. And to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We will call names, starting with our little papers here. If anyone has a slip of paper that I don't have, make sure I get those. I think I need one from you still. And once I call your name, please raise your hand and I'll bring a microphone over to you. Kelsey McDonald.
Don't make Lisa mad, she'll go after you.
Hi, so recently our Republican supermajority made it harder for college students to vote. I'm curious if you have plans, and this is actually for Diego, to help our college students vote easier. Is that something we can look forward to from you?
I think we're trying to stay on the topics here. Vote centers
Yeah, vote
and
centers
municipal
and
elections.
university on universities.
Vote centers on universities.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Chelsea. Sarah Bolian. And I think Sarah had 2 places here. If you could say your name and, I can open it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, Sarah Gullion, Delaware County, Muncie City Council. I'm wondering how many other, states do this kind of election, have changed it like that, and which states those are? And then my other question was, yeah, so if the municipal elections would be, how would current office holders and new elections be staggered? How would that work?
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Becky Branham. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. County, and if you're with.
I'm Becky Branham. I'm from Henry County, and no, I'm not representing any organization. My concern was the same as the first. It's whether or not vote centers will be available on college campuses to make it easier for college students.
Thank you so much. George Sullivan Davis. I can hold it for you.
What an incredible amount of work and information you delivered to us in a short amount of time. I'm interested to know if this slide deck, if these presentation slide decks are going to be available on indiana.gov, on the in.gov SOS website for our study. Specifically, I'm curious about the correlation between cost per voter and voter turnout. And I'm wondering if you can draw any inferences in having automatic registration for voters at the age of 18 compared to cost per voter. It seems like it would go down the more voters you have voting, and so it will be more cost efficient as well as more democratically significant.
Thanks so much.
I will say this PowerPoint will be part of what we submit to the General Assembly. As we collect comments, we may add more of this into the presentation as we go along through the other 2 meetings. And then we'll combine it into one final sort of PowerPoint and then report that we'll give to the General Assembly. So say that.
Seth Raleigh. Name, county, and if you're with an organization.
Seth Rollins, Delaware County, not a part of the organization. I just voiced my support for vote center in Delaware County and across the state. I think there's a lot of significant findings that show that they're pretty useful. As Matt and Dr. Kinsella mentioned there.
Thank you so much. Kylie Ferris.
County and Winter County, election supervisor Kylie Ferris.
here in support of Monroe County for vote centers. We had a vote center plan that we provided to the election board just earlier this year. It was voted down. And so we were just wondering if vote centers are approved, would we be able to use the plan that we currently have, or will there be a statuized plan for the whole state? Thank you. Charles Taylor.
Charles Taylor, Delaware County, speaking only for myself. I want to urge that we consider leaving municipal elections in the off year as they are now. I get the concern about turnout and cost efficiency. That's admirable. Those things are important. I think effectiveness is important too. In the case of elections, I'd argue that effective means meaningful. Voters should be offered meaningful choices between candidates, and candidates should run campaigns based on issues that are meaningful to the members of the electorate. That's the case in Muncie city elections now. The elections are competitive. We had contested races for mayor, city clerk, and all council seats in the last election. The candidates ran campaigns focused on issues particular to the challenges and opportunities facing Muncie. Elections are consolidated with the general election, especially the presidential election year. Campaigns for federal and statewide offices focus on issues of widespread interest in the country and state, as they should. Even when we elect state legislators and members of Congress to elect us to represent us locally, they still go off and they work with dozens or even hundreds of other similar legislators focusing on issues of national and statewide interest. In the Muncie city election, we elect 10 people, a mayor and 9 council members that are specifically focused on issues in Muncie. We elect 12, but the city clerk and the city judge have narrower responsibilities. In the atmosphere of a presidential and gubernatorial election, the focus on these very local issues that are important in a municipal election will get lost. It'll be more difficult for voters to get the information they need to make a meaningful choice on the local election. It'll be more difficult for municipal candidates to communicate their vision for the city. Not only will they be competing with state and federal candidates for attention in the political sphere, they'll be competing with them for campaign contributions and campaign volunteers as well. As I noted earlier, there's a ballot, there's runoff, roll-off as voters move down the ballot. There's some voters, they only show up to vote in the presidential election because that's all they care about. As they get down the ballot, as they said, people drop off and quit voting because they feel less informed. For a city like Muncie, that's going to mean adding a dozen races to the end of what's already a pretty long ballot. That's not only going to contribute to the ballot roll-off, the people that do vote the entire ballot, they're going to be in the voting booth longer. It's going to slow down the lines. That'll need to be accommodated. It's going to reduce these important races to an afterthought. We deserve better than that. So I'll end with this. Governing a city has never been easy. It's going to do nothing to get more difficult. The services of the city are important. And we spend much more on those services than we do on a once every 4 years election. Much, much more. And ensuring that those services are efficient and effective as they can be reported to the elected official on the basis of their vision providing those services, and not a multitude of important but ultimately unrelated issues. So I think moving municipal elections to the president from the current term to the presidential election will interfere with our ability to do that. So again, I urge that municipal elections be left at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shania Miller. Thanks. Back there. Shania? No? Okay. Linda? And sorry.
Linda, I can order for you. Just state your name. Linda Hanson, Delaware County. And which one of those is my office? Good. I'm going to follow what Charles said just now, because we would, this is probably more important in Delaware County, but we would support maintaining the current municipal elections just because we want people to pay attention to local officials. Democracy starts at home. Our officials who are here are the ones who have to respond to us and things that matter everywhere. So we would advocate for the current program for municipal elections. And we would also ask if anyone is considering moving them seriously, that we remove the possibility of doing straight party tickets.
Yes.
Because I think that's one of the disadvantages.
Thank you, I'm sorry, that's not part of our topics here.
Well, it's related.
Did you have another one in here?
You
Vote centers.
Would you like to just go ahead and
So-
knock it all out in one fell swoop?
The League of Women Voters have been supporting vote centers since it came into option in Indiana '6. And we would like to see vote centers in Delaware County. We've been at a public meeting together that's specifically about the details in Delaware County. We're hoping to do that on the 28th of this month, so next Thursday at high school. And I can tell a little bit more about vote centers. But
You haven't had enough.
another thing, that is also convenience and accessibility for voters, and we would like
Thank you so much.
students that have.
All right, Jim, local? Did I get that right?
Thanks, Jim. Name and county and if you work in an organization.
Jim Vogel, I'm in Delaware, and live in Delaware County, not with an affiliate organization. I'm very impressed with the stats that we received. I am in favor of voting centers. However, when you put up the slides in regards to how much money individuals we could save on an individual voter, I'm very concerned I'm not currently, but having been in the restaurant business for 31 years, I'm about service. And I question whether or not people as we go down the line will try to do more and more with less and less. In other words, we have more voters and we have fewer people to service those voters. And so I think those numbers, although they're not skewed, I think that they can be very misleading. When you have people that have to wait in line for an hour or a half an hour to vote, that does not vote well, in my opinion, for people being serviced, which is part of what this program, in my opinion, should be all about. Get people in, get them out. I also want to just acknowledge that I have been an inspector for precincts for quite a number of years. And unfortunately, for some of the voting centers that I've been in, we would have fewer than 100 voters in those, not voting centers, I'm sorry. In those precincts, we would have fewer than 100 people, makes for a long day. And I can also testify that a lot of people that come in are not familiar with where they're supposed to be voting, and then we have to fill out forms. They can't vote. Now they have to go somewhere else. When I was up in Eaton, which had a huge turnout that year, we had people in line all day long. And so I just think that if we have voting centers, we need to staff the voting centers. I am in favor of voting centers, but they need to be staffed and people need to be efficient. Thank you.
So.
Amy Raw. And name.
My name is Amy Rolfus. I am in St. Joe County. I am the county clerk, so I am in charge of elections. St. Joe County is the 5th largest county in Indiana, and we have been vote center county ever since I have taken over as the term. We love it. I'd like to speak out in support for vote centers. A lot of it has to do with the training that the election workers receive as well in order to keep things flowing, like some people have concerns about. Additionally, when the county changed over to vote centers, they invested that money into election worker pay. The money that they saved went right into the election worker pay, which I would advocate for if anyone is going to be changing to a vote center county. As for municipal elections, looking at our own budget, it would be a tremendous cost savings for us. I would like to bring up the point of voter fatigue. In my office, I get quite a few questions about can I vote? Can I not vote? Why can't I vote? St. Joseph County is very large geographically, so that's a big concern for me is voter fatigue. Every year there seems to be an election and our voters, I think, are not well informed. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Delaney Fritsch. Steve Page.
I'm saying we were kind of with a short notice. We didn't know you were doing in other areas, but anyway, poll worker at Dearborn County. I agree with that guy who spoke recently with the vote centers in Dearborn County in 2022. We had waits up to about 3 hours to vote. So I think it's very important, not only do you look at the cost per voter, but also the amount of time it takes them to actually cast their vote. In 2024, bless the circuit clerk, she had 2 additional vote centers established in Dearborn County. The waits were no longer than 40 minutes. So I don't care if it costs a little bit more. I think something like that would have been very important for those counties.
Thank you so much. Beth Davis. Oh, sorry.
I'm Beth Davis. I am also a county clerk and we do use vote centers. And I was a clerk for 8 years when we did precinct based, and I have been a clerk now for 7 years with the vote centers. And they are so sufficiently ran now. And so a lot of the concerns that people have mentioned about those with the long lines, vote center plans can be adjusted. So if you have an area where they have a long line, maybe by the next time they have an election, they may put 2 vote centers in that area and maybe not one in another area. So I think that can be taken care of. Thanks for all of your presentations and I agree with all the statistical cost savings that you have. I am support of moving the election of the municipal elections. It would work better for our county. I think even as elected official, when the tallies come in and the sheriff gets more votes than me, I'm like, well, why did the sheriff get more votes than what I did? And I think it's a lot with the voters. I don't know that it makes a difference. I think voters go to vote specifically for their neighbor, for their friend. Doesn't matter where they're at on the ballot, they're gonna find it. So I don't always agree with the thing that, you know, the drop off, I think is just how they're gonna look through the ballot. So that's just my comments. Thank you. Thank you.
And that was Wells County.
Yes.
Okay, I do have a couple in here that the issue to discuss was not part of the presentation, but I do want to make sure if you have a comment on what we're discussing that you are able to say that comment. So I have a Dale Archenbach. Okay. Julianne Franklin. Do you have a comment on the topics today? Okay, great.
I'm concerned with that, about the first question, voting centers near colleges. I know many students are not able to have means of transportation, so having voting centers available to young people is very important. I also am opposed to moving, extending terms for those politicians until the next cycle. There's like, let them finish out their term, but there's no reason to have like, kind of that partisan. Yes. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, name, county, and are you with an organization?
My name's Julian Franklin. I live here in Muncie, no organization.
Okay, thank you so much. George Sullivan Davis, do you want to have a different comment that's related to the topic?
I forgot to say that I'm with the County Democratic Party, I'm a poll worker. And even though my clerk's not here, Christy Crawford's an excellent clerk. Unfortunately, she's out for re-election.
Thank you. Nora Powell. Do you have a comment on some of the things today? Okay. The topics that we've discussed. I'm getting my workout in, guys.
My name is Nora Powell. I'm a city, Muncie City Council person. This is actually my district. We're sitting in my district. I support the voting centers, especially if they have one available to college students so that they have access easily to exercise that right. I echo Sarah Gullion, Dr. Taylor in regards to moving municipal elections. I think that does water down, and we'll see people who aren't familiar with the topics that specifically deal with Muncie elections, voting, and then the ballot drop off. It is specific to this. I'm disappointed that this meeting was held at 11:30 on a weekday, because 3 times Secretary of State said it, Matt said it, the other gentleman said it, how important this information is, and it is, and I appreciate the data collected, but to hold this meeting at 11:30 on a Friday doesn't seem to be transparent, and it seemed almost to be counterproductive to getting that information out.
Thank
there.
you so much. Okay, Stephanie?
Oh, that's me.
Okay, and you have a comment on the topics for today?
I do.
Okay, great. Name, county, and if you're with an organization, I'll hold the mic for you.
Okay, my name is Stephanie Graff Gilliland. I'm from Miami County. I'm a resident there. And I am also a board member for the Indiana Federation of Democrat Women. I am the chairwoman for the Miami County Democrats. I am extremely opposed to changing the municipal elections. Peru, Indiana, or Miami County is a very small community. Having ran for mayor in Peru, I can tell you that to change those elections would be extremely detrimental to a small community that is already tasked with getting out the vote, getting individuals there to take a strong opinion about who should lead the local leadership of the county. I also believe that we have some serious problems there with elections as it is. And I think that it would be best addressed to deal with what is not working right now, instead of hurrying up and trying to run through the change in the election. Specifically, we have individuals who were not even given a fair opportunity to vote in the most recent elections. And I sent that information forward to your office, so we don't even have to talk about that now. But we have great concerns, and I would absolutely be very vocally opposed to this.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Oh. This is, I'm unsure if I can read this handwriting. Can anyone practice that? And it seems like it may end in Faulkner, last name Faulkner. Oh, okay. Thank you. Sharon.
Sharon Milburn, Carroll County elected clerk. I have been on both sides of the vote center issue. When I first started, I just started out as a absentee poll worker. And I was actually the one that went around to the 19 different areas in our county and set all of those locations up. My day started at 3 a.m. and it was a very long day. Transitioning, went more aggressive in the office, became the elected clerk at the time. We are now already vote centers. We currently have 6 vote centers in our county, so we reduced from 19 to 6. Statutorily, we only are required to have 2, but we do have them all in every corner of our county, the furthest points in our county. They are very beneficial. We still have some voters that are confused as to where to go, not understanding that they can go wherever they want to go in those 6 locations. I understand the concern for the college students. I currently have 2 at Purdue. So I understand the need for that. I think like one of my fellow clerks mentioned, we can always, you can change that vote center plan. You can move them where they need to go. We had a very high profile murder, case, this last election, and which put me out of our main vote center. And when I say main vote center, I mean 65% of our voters went to that center. I'm struggling to find a location, found a location. We ended up having half the machines, the voting machines that we normally have, caused a lot of line issues. So I implemented, my poll worker, inspectors call me every half an hour if they have a line more than 15 people. I then get on the phone and I call the next place and say, you know, where are you at? Some locations have 0 wait line. We notify the voters that are in line. There's a vote center 2 miles down the road, 3 miles down the road, no lines. That was very beneficial for us. Again, we are a small community, so that does work for us. Will not work, I assume, your counties. But it did work really well for us. As far as the municipal elections, we have a very low turnout. I think this would help our turnout. I actually reached out to our local ones that are on the municipal election, and I had an 85 to 90%. They would love for it to go to a different year so that they have more turnout, so that more people's voices are heard, because they're not being heard now because people don't want to get out. Well, I'm only gonna vote for one person, I'm not going out, which is an issue for our county. Thank you so much.
Okay. That's 3.
Hi, I'm Destry Ritchie. I was one of the pilot counties. I'm Cass County Clerk. I'm also the Clerks Association Treasurer. So I'm here representing the officers for our Clerks Association. We are in support of vote centers. The plan can be changed. I know that several of the counties who have colleges are concerned about the college students being able to vote. It's important, I don't know if you realize this, but your county election board are the ones that decide where those vote centers are placed. And they try to place those strategically on where the number of voters are. So if you have a high in your county at a college, I am sure that they will place maybe 1 or 2 vote centers there. It's important to communicate with your county election board so that they know where those specifically need to be placed. And they will hold public hearings to let you voice those opinions. In regards to municipal elections, I personally am in favor. I come from a medium-sized county. We have one city that has like 20,000 people in it. They paid $69,000 for the primary and $75,000 for the general. They did not have that in their budget. We have a lot of small towns. If they had to have had an election, they wouldn't have been able to pay it. So they have been actually moving to the general elections, the even numbered years, to help with those costs for them. The bigger cities, maybe if the legislators left it to their discretion to be able to move it, and they can afford that whopping amount, then so be it. I'm sure our county clerks, I know our county clerks will help you with that since we run the election.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, Sue.
Sue Arrington, Delaware County. I'm the state representative from Muncie. The issue I'd like to bring up is the vote center. I have supported vote centers for a long time. And
I know that it is the election board, 3 people, to make that decision. It has to be unanimous. Delaware County cannot seem to get a unanimous vote on this. Politics get in the way every time. I've been watching this for many years, and I've seen when there are 2 Democrats on with the board, the Republican doesn't want to do it. When there are 2 Republicans on the board, the Democrat doesn't want to do it. So I'm wondering, how did all those 66 counties that have vote centers, what did you do to get over this impasse?
Yes. Okay, Linda.
Thank you. I wanted to come back because I did not say thank you to everyone who presented, and particularly to the VSTOP folks, because that's the data that we really need to have. So I appreciate that. And I want to say one other thing about staffing. If we go to vote centers, I mean, yes, people could go to any one of the vote centers, but I know just from visiting precincts in the last few years, there are times you walk in, there's no one there. It's only the staff. And our turnout is horrendous. In Indiana, it's not wonderful in Delaware County. And we've got to find a way to make that possible without the expenditures on staff that are getting bored, without voters. So, again, we support vote centers. And if you want to learn more, we have a meeting and I'll hand out something to tell you where it is next Thursday.
Thanks. You. Hey. I think we have the last one. Did you?
I did. I have a question.
Okay,
It's related to the president.
name, county, organization.
My name
Sorry.
is, I'm from Delaware County, and my question is for the 5 of you, actually. All of you presented statistics based on voter turnout. And I'm just wondering if the methodology you each used was consistent between each other. And that just for watching the presentations, I was sitting there wondering, did you arrive at the voter turnout the same way that he did, the way he did? And that would be very helpful for a voter to understand what you're talking about. If that methodology was, you know, identified.
Yes, we both use the same voter turnout data. Some of our cost data is a little different because we pulled we did a survey of the clerks, and we also pulled CB9 forms. There's a form that the clerks fill out that just go over different data points in elections. One of those cost of elections. The cost that they put on there is an estimate. So for the counties that fill out the survey, we took that number. And I think VSTOP just did what was on the CEB9 form. So if the county didn't fill out the survey, we took what was on the form. And then if the county did fill out the survey, we took what they told us, because we took that to be the more accurate representation in our mind of what they actually spent.
And is that data for the voting centers as well? For the each?
Yeah, so for the voting centers, we did use so their numbers. I actually consulted with Kagan and asked, did you use the total number of registered voters, or did you use turnout when you did your cost per vote turnout? And then we utilized the CEB9s for all in order to create more consistent analysis over the 12 years, because we could not cost data, right? From a county, maybe from 2012, the clerk may not be working anymore, and they may not have that, but they do report it on that CEB9. So we use the CEB9s for all 92 counties for all of those years.
Appreciate that. It just wasn't clear in the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much. I think we have one more, Michael. Is it your question related to the topics here?
To the presentation.
Okay, the question on here doesn't seem like it is.
Exactly.
Michael Potter, Johnson County, White River 9 Vice Precinct Chair, Michael Potter for House District 47, and Chief Supporter of Blythe Potter for Secretary of State. You presented some great data, MIT, quality institution. Will you assure the people in the room, in the media, that you'll actually use the research as opposed to how you use the research for global warming and COVID?
Thank you so much. I think that was it. Okay, just kidding. of my little papers have gotten tangled up.
I am Linda Smith. I am the Madison County Clerk. And just for the lady that mentioned how on earth you can get there with gun centers, Madison County struggled with that for a while, and just persistence, and just keep talking, keep getting the information from your voters. The voters will make a difference if they want vote centers. So just persistence.
Yeah. Any others that I missed? Okay. Wow. Then I think that will be our meeting here. Again, thank you for everyone who made the trip here, whether it was a long trip or you just stepped out your front door and came over. Also, thank you to everyone who might be watching us on our live stream. And thank you to our presenters for all of your hard work in putting this together. Yeah, we can clap, absolutely. We do have 2 additional meetings planned, which will also be live streamed on our YouTube, and our office must submit our findings of the study and final report to the Legislative Council of the General Assembly by November 1st. Okay, thank you guys so much for